Hey everybody, welcome back to On Stage, Off Stage. I'm your host, George Sapio, and this is episode number 201, May of 2026. Our guest this month is Dr. Kate Busselle. Dr. Busselle is founder of Heartland Intimacy Design and Training, an intimacy training company which offers academic, accessible, and affordable intimacy training entirely online. She is also assistant professor of movement and stage combat at the University of Oklahoma. Recently, a confluence of cosmic synchronicity found its way into my lifeward path when a theater colleague and I were discussing how to block close physical movement. And a week later, a post for Heartland appeared on my feed. Hey, not one to ignore the subtle gestures of the universe, I contacted Dr. Busselle, and here we are. One of those areas of theater that doesn't get much talk, doesn't get much play. It's one of those things that we only talk about when we're up against the situation where we actually need it. And so my question is, let's start at the beginning. I mean, you're a theater person. How did you get involved in advising, teaching, and staging intimacy situations?
Totally. So I was a graduate student at the University of Missouri in 2017. I went to a conference called the Association for Theater and Higher Education, ATHA. On that trip, I connected with two other individuals, Chelsea Pace and Laura Reichard. It was in Las Vegas that year. And we connected over the fact that we all had a shared interest in, hey, there's some difficult situations that we've been asked to handle in theater where we haven't really felt like we've had the tools to address this particular situation. Especially me as a graduate student, I have a weird level of agency of like, I can tell undergraduate students what to do, but I can't really correct faculty on their bad behavior type thing. And so we sat on the floor of the casino in Las Vegas and we wrote out a plan, and the three of us created theatrical intimacy education together. So we started this company August 1st, 2017, and the Me Too movement happened in October of
Right.
2017.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very short window for us to start to think about what we wanted this work to look like. And then, the urgency came in rather quickly of people being like, we need tools now, we need your help now. So we developed a curriculum over the course of that fall into spring, and then started offering workshops as part of that process. And we were offering in-person workshops only at that point. And I stayed with the company until March of 2019. And then I decided to branch off and start my own company, which is Heartland Intimacy Design and Training, because the big gap I saw in this emerging market was accessibility. And for me, the thing that I couldn't justify as a poor graduate student myself who was experiencing this on the teaching end, I was having a hard time financing these trips to go to these different regional workshops that we were offering because I wasn't able to, cover the cost of a flight and hotel and food on, a tiny undergraduate student budget,
Yeah.
or a graduate student budget.
And that stuff does add up.
It does add up. And so the fact that all of the other training organizations at that time were very firm that they wanted to do in-person training, I said, there's got to be a way. So I actually developed and created a fully online asynchronous intimacy training curriculum, and was the first person to do that. And I published it August of 2019, and then the pandemic hit in March of 2020. So I've just been lucky with timing that
Yeah.
I've been just slightly ahead of the curve. And now a lot of the other training organizations are actually copying my model in terms of how we can offer this training in a way that's more accessible and meeting people where they are, with them not having to pay an arm and a leg to get to LA or get to New York or get to Chicago, where they can spend a bunch of money just to get a quick snippet, that they actually have unlimited access to the content. So really my main goal was to find a way to get the training to the people who I feel like would be least likely to have it but need it the most. And that's usually high school theater educators, and people who are in more rural community theater type settings, people who know that this work is out there but don't know how to get it, don't know how to finance it, and are doing the best they can with the tools they have. And my job, I feel, is to help make that work easier for them to access.
In your experience, since everybody had been doing this up close and personal, okay, the advisor in the room with the actors and the director, everybody's on the rehearsal stage, you do it all online. How do you achieve the same results without being in that particular physical close space?
Totally. So we do very controlled, structured exercises where I give an assignment that I say, hey, I need you to facilitate this particular boundary establishment exercise with 3 different pairs of people. And so they will go into their community. They might use family members. They might use their classmates. If I'm working with a current student, they can go out into their local community and they can practice these exercises. And while they're doing that, they're recording them. So when they turn in their assignment, I look at the video footage of what they did, and it actually allows me to give much more precise and specific feedback. I can type in, hey, at 1:27, you said this thing. Here's what I would recommend saying next time when you do this again. So I can give much more detailed and specific feedback than I would be able to if I was physically in person. The other thing that it does is it gives the person who is learning the ability to claim space as the leader in the room and not feel like that I'm standing there breathing down their throat, like, hey, I'm right here. I'm going to be watching your every move like a hawk and making sure you're not doing anything wrong. It actually gives them more confidence in the work, knowing that they are able to facilitate it on their own. And in that process of them having to work with folks out in the community, that work then spreads to them. And then it will spread beyond them. So it's a cascading effect of being able to impact a whole theater community through one person.
And the most important thing, of course, is personal physical safety.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the whole reason why we have them record it. So then that way they have some sort of safety mechanism that if something were to go wrong, I can actually function as that third party to help mediate a conversation between people if there was something to go awry. Luckily, a lot of the people who have done the online training have had very gracious and giving, friends, colleagues, family members to help them in this work. And I think that a lot of people forget that the greatest signal to me that you are a safe person to work with is that you want to learn more about this work, that this work is something that you know is important and you know is an essential piece. If you were someone who was like, I don't really see the point, it seems like it's a lot of extra time, energy, effort for something that doesn't yield any results, I might not feel comfortable having you as an intimacy professional in the room. I might want somebody else to take that role. So a lot of people who are clamoring for this work are the types of people who they know that they can do better than what they're doing right now. And that's what I really end up seeing a lot in the training.
Okay. Is there a difference in how people react, how people progress, or in teaching men and women?
Yes, I will say, so I also teach an in-person version of the class at University of Oklahoma. And what has been really interesting is, a lot of times when the men are learning and they are in the training, they have more hurdles to overcome in terms of how do they share space with their other collaborators in such a way where it doesn't feel like they're trying to step on anybody's toes or to get in the way of the process or assert dominance, things like that. So they're actually thinking even harder, I would say, sometimes than necessarily some of the women in that regard, that they are so overly aware of how their presence in this particular role impacts how the work is facilitated. Certainly, this is a woman-dominated field. Which is not surprising because a lot of it is emotional labor. A lot of it is me facilitating discussions between people about really vulnerable and insecure things. So that does tend to skew this as a more feminine, quote unquote, profession. But I will say the men who are doing this work are some of the most kind, caring, compassionate. Like I feel so confident in their ability to facilitate the room because they have done the work to decenter themselves in the process, that they're not having to be like, look at me being the superhero saving the day. That's another issue that tends to happen when people are looking at getting into this work. There's a lot of saviorism that happens. A lot of people who are like, I want to fix it. I want to be the person who saves the day. I saved the scene. And that's not really our job. Our job is to help people communicate. So in a sense, we're almost like a dramaturg, that I'm doing a lot of translation work between here's what the director wants, here's how I can communicate it to the actors, so then that way they understand what is the actual blocking and movement of the action, and then reflecting back to the director, here's what they're willing to do and here's what they're not willing to do. So then that way nobody has to deal with, oh, well, I don't want to seem difficult to work with. I don't want to feel like I'm a problem. I'm trying to be easy to work, all those types of sentiments that tend to happen in theater. I don't want to be replaced, right? That there's a lot of those types of mindsets that happen with actors in the theater. So my job is really to facilitate conversation, and sometimes really uncomfortable conversations, like what oral hygiene do we agree to do before we have each rehearsal for this kiss? That's not a question that people often ask each other. And it is a very important question. It's so important, asking about people about food allergies. If somebody has a severe peanut allergy, that co-star should not be eating peanuts during the run of the show. So, being able to facilitate those types of communication is really the most important part.
It's an awful lot to think about. I mean, you've got people on stage getting into situations where they are engaging in intimate acts. I mean, it could be kissing, which isn't a very intimate act. But there are more, quote, I'm using air quotes here, intimate acts that they could go through. There are love scenes, there are sex scenes, there are scenes between two actors who have not had a relationship, who don't really know each other. Right? And somehow they have to be brought together on stage for a performance where the audience believes they think of nothing else except that person in the universe at that particular moment on stage, plot-wise. They have to make everybody believe that they're in love or they are hot for each other. How difficult is it to get actors from first hello to believability?
I would say it depends on the experience level of the actor.
Is that a legitimate question?
Absolutely. Okay. So I would say, I do work a lot, obviously, with undergraduate students. Some of them haven't even had their first kiss yet, and I'm having to negotiate with them how they have a kiss with a scene partner, right? So, being able to have those conversations at that level, a lot of the work that I do is actually cutting intimacy first. Which is kind of unexpected, right? That my first question is usually, is it necessary? Do we absolutely need to have them do this passionate makeout scene all over the sofa in order to communicate that these characters are in love, or are there other ways that we can show that?
Okay, isn't that a question for the playwright or the director?
That is a question I usually ask the director.
Okay.
A lot of times intimacy is written into stage direction.
Yeah.
So it becomes a question of what is the threshold we need in order to communicate the intensity of what's happening between the characters. A great case study of this is David Auburn's Proof. The scene where Catherine and Hal are on the front porch and they've both had a little bit to drink and they're starting to get a little flirtatious with each other. Within a 2-page span, he's written in, I think, 9 different kisses. And in practice, you could absolutely do all 9. But we found when we were doing our production at OU, 3 was actually kind of the perfect number, because for us, more than that felt gratuitous, that we were just kind of kissing for the sake of kissing, and it didn't advance the story or the narrative of the characters in any profound or meaningful way. So for us, 3 felt like actually a very achievable number that still honored the playwright's intention, but also worked with our actors in terms of their level of experience and boundaries. Now, if I'm doing a professional production of Proof, I may have actors who have been through the ringer in terms of what this industry does to people and are very comfortable doing absolutely anything that is asked of them.
Right.
So in that situation, I'm going to defer to the actors in terms of their comfort level of, hey, do you want to explore all 9 of these kisses? They may offer it to me, hey, maybe like 6 or 7. I don't know if we need all 9. So again, there's some editing that happens in that process. Pre-show, I would talk to the director to say, hey, what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you absolutely need to see happen on stage for it to honor your vision as the director? And being able to know that ahead of time, then I can relay that information to the actors of like, hey, these are the director's non-negotiables. Is that something you're willing to explore in the rehearsal space? And if not, like, this might not be the right production for you, and that's okay. But we would rather know that in advance instead of us getting to that rehearsal after we've spent so much time memorizing the lines, doing all the blocking, all this other stuff, and finding out, oh, we're 2 weeks from open and the actor actually doesn't feel comfortable doing this work.
Yeah, that should definitely be discussed as early as possible, because that's, I would argue, one of the more critical parts of any play.
Absolutely. And a lot of times people just assume, people have read this play, people know what the roles are, people know what they should be expecting as an auditioner. And I can just say, in the economy of time is money, everyone is spending so much time just trying to make ends meet that it's actually more common than not that actors don't actually have the time to read the play. So being able to provide them with some sort of documentation at the callback phase, that's something that I do, is I create a little list, a little Google form that people can fill out when they're called back and say, hey, just so you know, these are the acts that are expected of this particular role. Can you indicate yes, no, let's chat, your willingness to explore these particular moments in the play? We just want to make sure you're aware of them before you're offered the role, so you have a chance to think about it. And I've had a lot of great conversations with people through that document, of people being like, hey, I'm actually comfortable with all of this, but if this person's cast, I don't know that I can do this.
Sure. Okay.
Great. I would love to know that before we cast. So then that way I can avoid a lot of problems in advance.
That's a surprise nobody needs later on.
No.
Yeah.
So the thing with intimacy work is that a lot of what happens is when we're called in, I'd say about 85% of the time we're called in because something's already gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And about 15% of the time, it's when they're trying to do the best work ahead of time and make sure that they're supporting the actors they bring in. So it's a question of harm prevention or harm reduction. So a lot of my work ends up being harm reduction of, okay, let's see how we can find repair and make a strategy forward. But I would love for most of my work to be harm prevention, because if I can prevent harm from happening in the first place, we keep way more people in the theater industry.
Oh, yeah. Last thing you need is an unsafe production in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
You've been talking about working with David Auburn's play, Proof. Okay. This has been produced 100,000 times. It's won unbelievable awards. How different would it be with a play by an unknown playwright, unproduced play, still in development?
Absolutely. So we did this actually here at OU. I worked with a lovely, lovely playwright named Megan Brown on her play called What Happened While Hero Was Dead. So it's the time that Hero, in Much Ado About Nothing, we are believing she is dead, but she's sequestered somewhere. What's happening with her? And we did a workshop production of it at OU. And in that process, it was a lot of discussing with the playwright, hey, so you have this, she wrote them as what she calls them in the play are sex ballets. So there's certain motifs of energy or things that are happening, a series of images, all this type of stuff, to communicate Hero's evolution and sexual discovery journey. Mm-hmm. In this play, when we were starting rehearsals of it, I would ask Megan, hey, how many of these moments, do you want to see? And are these moments literal, that you want them in this specific order, or can we play with the order at all? Like, what are the limitations of these particular moments? And her response was, oh, it doesn't even have to be any of those moments at all. And I was able to give her the feedback, oh, hey, okay, great. Because me reading it as an intimacy professional, I'm assuming you want me to do this literally. So she actually added a note in the front of the script that, hey, these are suggestions, but this is the main tone we're going for. So you can adapt it based on what your actors are willing to do, which we wouldn't have had that discovery had we not collaborated. And she actually wrote into her script that if you are to produce this work, you must hire an intimacy professional. So being able to have that agency as a playwright, being able to talk to someone and go, okay, so here's what I'm thinking for this. This is what I'm trying to achieve. Is it coming across that way? And me being able to reflect back, well, if I'm taking on this piece of art, here's what how I would approach it, or what I would think based on what you've written. So if that's not what you want, let's make adjustments. So the collaboration and new development is probably one of my favorite things. I've worked a lot with the Great Plains Theater Festival in Omaha, Nebraska,
Right.
and in a staged reading setting. What does the playwright need the audience to see visually versus being read out loud? Are there certain moments that we actually do need to see these characters kiss instead of having someone read it? And what are the impact factors of doing that in a staged reading setting? Are there ways that we can communicate sex acts or intimacy vocally through breath work, through something like that, knowing that the actors still have to be on book and follow their lines, but give the audience the idea of what's happening? So new play development is a space that really is open to collaboration with intimacy professionals, which I think is great.
Right.
It's just a different form of dramaturgy.
Makes perfect sense. I wish you were around when I was doing my first play back in the 90s. Because here I am not knowing what I'm doing. I wrote an intimate scene between two characters. And once we got into production, and here's another bad piece of luck, they asked me to direct, which I knew nothing about that at the time. I just expected them to, hey, go for it. Shows you where my level of emotional intelligence was at that particular point in my life. But these actors were in no way attracted to each other. In fact, they were so disattracted. And that moment in the play, instead of being what I wanted it to be, which was to show great sexual attraction, became a moment of horror and comedy. Just watching these two actors be in one of the most uncomfortable positions probably in their theatrical lives at that point. So yeah, it's especially with new play development and new plays and playwrights and directors who have no idea what they're doing.
Oh, well, and again, it's like, how were you supposed to know that the actors were going to end up hating each other? And how do we negotiate? Okay, if that's the case, what are our options? Like being able to lay out, okay, do we need to recast someone because this is an important pivotal scene to you as a playwright that we want it to be this really impactful moment? And sometimes, like I do have to ask my colleagues sometimes, hey, I know that this was on your non-negotiables list. This was a moment you absolutely need to have in the show. And when the auditions happened, the actor said, yep, I can do that, no problem. And now that they're in the rehearsal process and realizing what they're about to do, they're now coming to me and saying, hey, I don't know if I can do this. So is that really a non-negotiable moment for you?
Yeah.
Is that something you absolutely need to have happen? And if it is, then yeah, we do have to have the uncomfortable conversation of, do we need to replace the actor? And so it's a matter of artistry. I will say I have found more often than not, the director will often work with the actor in terms of what their boundaries are at, especially when I'm at an educational institution. They're still figuring everything out. They're figuring out deodorant for all I know. Like they are still trying to figure everything out about their lives.
Deodorant, mints,
Please, anything.
Yeah, no
Oral
garlic
hygiene,
for
love
lunch.
It. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, they're still trying to figure out so much about who they are as people at the educational level, but even at the professional level. Hey, like if your actors are actually feeling very uncomfortable with each other, they actually don't have to do this, right? That we do have to acknowledge the reality that there may be times that, you know what, we thought that this collaboration was going to work well, and maybe it's just not the right time for this particular collaboration. And even if we do want to keep these two actors working on the show, is there a way that we can communicate this sexual tension and passion and feeling the hots for each other in a way that may not be literal, but still communicates the idea? A lot of the work that I do is also like non-literal sex and like non-literal creative interpretations of things. I worked on a production of Terrence McNally's Corpus Christi, and it was during the second, I think it was the Omicron wave of COVID. So people were again, it was just like another evolution of, we can't be in close proximity to each other. We can't really do any of the passionate makeout scenes that are written into the script. How can we communicate this? And so the director had given each of the actors, when they are baptized into the play, a scarf to represent, that they are now in the character. So we ended up using the scarves to communicate a lot of intimacy, of lassoing people and pulling them in towards each other, to communicate a sense of closeness, that there's some passion, energy, drive there. Or if there's a really awkward scene that's not going well, like they were tying the scarves up and they were just stuck and couldn't figure out how to untie the the scarves and just the awkwardness and the fumbling of that, to be able to communicate the idea like these two are not actually gelling in the way that we think they should. So there's definitely non-literal ways to stage these moments. It's just a matter of thinking a little outside of the box instead of feeling like we have to be in realism all the time. There are other ways to tell these stories.
I saw a production a number of years ago of Angels in America, first half. And there's a scene where two characters have sex in the park, in Central Park. And knowing this was coming, I was wondering how they were going to stage this, because this is summer stock theater, general, community, not community theater, but, regional theater audiences. And this could be a very provocative, very touchy scene. And the director had them across the stage from each other, as far apart as possible, going through the motions, the actual motions of doing this. And I'm still not sure how I thought about this. Probably it was the best decision they could have made, but there were still people in the audience who were shocked.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just giving a sense of space, but still knowing what's happening.
Yeah.
The audience gets to go through that fun cognitive dissonance of, is what happened? Is what I think is happening on stage right now? I think that's what's supposed to be happening right now.
If I take piece A and put it with piece B in my mind, yeah.
Absolutely. And that might actually be a way to engage the audience more in what's happening, because they're having to kind of lean in a little bit and do some thought process of what's happening here. Oh, I think that's happening here. How do I feel about that? That they can live in that discomfort a little bit if they are experiencing discomfort, that they can actually reckon with it a little bit instead of just being presented, hey, here's what you expect. Here's what you've seen all the time in the movies.
Yeah.
And then going, well, that wasn't anything new or original or exciting. Now they actually have to wrestle with something.
Yeah, that staging caused some spirited conversation for a couple of weeks after that between the theater crowd. And there were pros and cons on both sides. And I thought the fact that it's engaging this much discussion validates it right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I think thinking outside the box is huge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. We've been talking about intimacy, and it covers so much. We just discussed gay sex. We were talking about kissing a little while ago. How many different types of intimacy are there?
In my opinion, four. In my opinion, there are four
Okay.
categories of intimacy. So the first being physical intimacy. That is going to be your makeout scenes, your sex acts, could be solo sex acts even, right? All of that falls under that category. But it also doesn't have to be sexual. It might be something like there's a caretaking scene that's happening between a parent and a child, that they're nurturing them in some way. They're running a fever or something like that, and they're doing things to physically caretake another person. That's absolutely a form of intimacy. Thinking about emotional intimacy. So a lot of times these are the big, profound confessional scenes that happen in plays a lot, where a character is revealing a deep, dark truth about themselves or about something they've done. I'm thinking along the lines of like Harold Pinter's Betrayal, that there's a lot of confessing that happens in that play. So that emotional openness, what we like to call in the theater industry, vulnerability, right? That's actually an act of emotional intimacy that I'm sharing with another character. The third being nudity, whether that's implied or literal. So if we are doing the full Monty, when the lights are backlighting all of the performers at the end of the play, whether or not they actually are naked doesn't really matter. It's because we're implying that nudity is happening there, that we need to really think about the mechanics of that. And then the fourth is sexual violence, right? So the idea that we do have a lot of sexual violence written in the American canon. It happens everywhere.
Right.
And that's really how a lot of us got started in this work, was that we were being asked to work on these really intense sexual violence scenes. The 2000s was a really like prime time, and like the 2010s, where we had a lot of that happening on the stage. And really having to figure out what are all of the nuances that we need to do to track this. And I do want to be clear, I don't think that sexual violence is a form of intimacy, but it does fall under the umbrella and the purview of an intimacy professional.
Well,
So
you still
that
have to get
does
two actors safely on stage to make this thing
absolutely,
happen.
and to
Yeah.
not activate a ton of trauma in those bodies, right? So there's a
Mhm.
lot of things that have to happen in order to make the actors feel as confident as they can in those performances.
I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, all right, I could picture being coached, all right, and guided on how to kiss somebody on stage safely. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not traumatic for either of us. Okay. But to actually perform an act of sexual violence, that's a whole nother cosmic level of translation, commitment, intimacy. Uh, yeah, I'm not
Vulnerability.
vulnerable. I'm pretty sure I don't think I could do it.
No, I mean, again, it's, if you think about, Streetcar Named Desire is one of the most popular plays that's in
Yes.
the American canon. And how often do we do productions of that play where we don't really talk about it? We kind of talk around it, and we're like, well,
Hmm.
maybe it was more consent. Like we try to minimize what actually happens between Blanche and Stanley a lot
Right.
of the time. We try to minimize it. We try to cut it off before it happens. So then that way we're not having to go there. But I think part of the yucky part of that play is that no, Tennessee Williams really went there. And so, how do we honor that intention, the spirit of that, in a way that's safer for the actors to navigate and something that's repeatable? That's the other key part of a lot of
Hmm.
intimacy work is that we're actually creating a structure where we can have consistency in the intimacy every single night, knowing that it's not supposed to change or deviate unless something has gone catastrophically wrong. This is mainly in response to a lot of performers experiencing, well, his hand was first on my back, and then it moved to my lower back, and then it moved to my butt cheek, right? So, like those progressive things that change over the course of rehearsal and not knowing how to address it.
Yes.
That's really where we're saying, no, we're creating a very clear container as to what is going to happen in this space. And we're giving that information to the stage manager for them to lock in and see what's happening and be able to track if changes are being made after we've made an agreement and know how to check in with those actors after the fact.
Yeah. There's a lot of discussion that needs to go on there. It's tricky at the very minimum and could possibly be dangerous if something goes wrong
Absolutely. And
later
that's
on.
why we
Yeah.
sign contracts.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is documenting, right? I'm writing down, here's the choreography that we've agreed upon. The
Hmm.
actors write down, here's the choreography we've agreed upon. We all sign off on it. And again, it's not like it's locked permanently. If we discover once we get to the actual tech process and we're on the set, we're like, oh, this, the way we thought this was going to work actually doesn't work at all. We need to recalculate a couple things. We can always go back and revise that document. But the idea that there's some written agreement somewhere that this is what the blocking should be and this is what we all agreed to do and we all agree that this was staged in a consent-based manner and
Hmm.
that we all agreed to this particular set of choreography. Now I have something that's actionable if there is someone who decides to be a boundary breaker. That if someone is repeatedly a problem in this rehearsal process, I now have
Yeah.
just cause to terminate them because they agreed to a contract and are now invalidating that contract.
That's good to know. Yeah. This is such, I mean, we've been talking about issues that are so critical and so possibly harmful and so intimate physically, spiritually, intellectually. Um, why is this not more a part of the actual canon of theater training that students get in universities, colleges, and other places? Uh, it's not very common,
No,
but
it's not.
it
And
should
I would
be.
it absolutely should be. And I think a lot of that, unfortunately, is the Stanislavski based system. So a lot of what we teach in the United States is an Americanized version of Stanislavski. Stanislavski is king, whether that you're going through the Uta Hagen branch, whether you're going through the Stella Adler branch, that there's a bunch of different branches that you can go down, but all is kind of rooted in this idea of Stanislavski. And that the other thing that has been happening is the popularization of the method and method acting,
Mhm.
right? So the idea of the Strasbergian, I am going to fully immerse myself in this character and I am not going to depart from this character, it's actually glorified by our industry. A lot of actors receive significant praise for playing parts where they have fully immersed themselves to a place that could be potentially dangerous, and then they are given an Academy Award for doing so.
Yes.
And I think, Heath Ledger is our textbook case study as how this can go so horrifically wrong if someone immerses themselves in that work to the point where they lose themselves entirely. So part of it is actually teaching our students as they're coming through the system, hey, that's not the end all be all of acting. That's actually not the safest form of acting you can do. And if you feel like that is what you need to do to achieve acting, as Michael Caine said to Dustin Hoffman, my dear boy, have you tried acting? Right? So this is where we really have to reckon with this part of the Stanislavskian system of, hey, there actually does need to be a distinction between character and actor. If we fuse them, we're not acting anymore. That we're actually performing like weird trauma therapy rituals is what's happening. So being able to create a clear distinction of where actor ends and where character begins is a really important piece of the process. And that's been a lot of the research I've been doing with my professor hat on, of looking at de-rolling and debriefing practices. So what are things that we are doing after a performance to help the actors release that role from themselves? A lot of times we don't tell them anything because we think they'll figure it out. Direct quote from a professor that I have worked with many times in workshops.
Right.
So, a lot of the times they feel like, oh, they'll just figure it out. They know what to do. They know how to take care of themselves. No, they don't. They do not know how to take care of themselves. They have not been provided those tools. So a lot of my work has been teaching actors, hey, these are some different rituals that you can do in order to help yourself transition out of the role. And the reason why this is not fully integrated into American training and curriculum is because it's not one size fits all. Everybody wants the exact same tool to work the same way for every single person, and that's not the reality of the work we do. To de-roll from Hamlet is very different than tree number 3 in The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
I'm going to need less work to de-roll from The Wizard of Oz, but if I'm de-rolling from Hamlet, I may need to try several things and do several steps to leave that character behind. And again, it's something that is slowly starting to get integrated into curriculum, but it's something that people just assume that actors know how to do, and they don't.
Is that what you mean by trauma-informed work?
Yeah. So trauma-informed work is thinking about ways, how can we elicit emotions from characters or elicit emotions from the actors who are portraying these characters in a way that's not, hey, tell me about the time your parents got divorced. Hey, let's activate some trauma for you in order for you to achieve this emotional state. And yeah, you might be able to do it that one time, but it's not something that's repeatable long-term, because the more and more you use that particular piece of trauma, the more you're actually resolving the trauma subconsciously. So that's why it doesn't work long-term. It's not consistent. It doesn't stay, because you're actually working through that trauma each time you bring it up as some sort of source of inspiration. So actually having concrete tools. I mean, the one tool that I use with my students all the time and they love, because they're all so into music, I tell them, make a playlist for yourself that you listen to once the show is done. You've already come off stage, you've already bowed, you've done all that stuff, you're getting out of your costume. Pop in your playlist of your favorite music, like whether that's, George Michael or like Backstreet Boys or whatever, but like have it be some super fun playlist that gets you out of the space of the show so you can start coming back to you and you're not hanging on to that before you leave the theater. So a lot of my students, they'll have fun customizing their little playlists, and they're all backstage with their headphones in, bouncing around as they're putting their clothes away. That's a really helpful tool for them to be able to go, okay, I'm not Hamlet anymore. How do I go back to being George?
It's a healing process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I took a Meisner course for several semesters, and one of the activities we had was a grief prep, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Absolutely.
Right? You go off into another room and you think of something that sends you into a deep mode of sadness and hopelessness. Then you come out and you do the Meisner back and forth and that sort of thing. And the more I did it, there were other preps as well. There was a joy prep, there was other preps, but the grief prep, I came to fear, because in the course of one's life, we go through things that we don't particularly care to remember. We don't want to
No.
remember. But using this as a tool, okay, to play upon yourself, to literally change the status of your mental equilibrium for a period of time, right? And if you're in a show that requires you to go to this mode every single night, that's got to get tricky after a while.
Absolutely. Adam Driver did a big interview about this not too long ago, where he was, someone who used to be a Marine, right? So someone who has seen some really dark stuff happen. He says it best, I think, is that the job is not for me to feel, the job is to make the audience feel. So if I elicit the physical response that elicits the response in the audience that, wow, that character is really going through something, I don't have to jeopardize my own psyche to make that happen. Right? There's different tools and techniques that we can implement that just because I'm not quote unquote feeling it doesn't mean that it's not impacting the audience in any given way. Because if it's all about us feeling it, it might not translate to the audience. If it's so immersed in how this emotional state feels, it might not translate. So knowing that that isn't a consistent method, our goal should be, how do we elicit that emotion from the audience? That's really what our goal should be at the end of the day.
Yeah. And here we are back to Olivier. Dear boy, why don't you try acting?
Why don't you try acting? It's my favorite quote.
I love it. One last question, and then I will let you go find your snow shovel. We've been talking about protecting people from physical and emotional harm this whole time. And yet you have certificates in unarmed combat, rapier and dagger, quarterstaff, I'm not done yet, single sword, broadsword and shield, knife, and theatrical firearms safety. Okay, first of all, I am in no way going to piss you off.
No, not a good call.
How did you get involved in that?
So interestingly enough, a lot of the intimacy professionals who started this work all came from the stage combat world, right? So again, it's mechanisms of safety. What are things that I can do to ensure that I don't harm my scene partner and make sure that we are communicating in a way that we create the illusion of danger, but we're not actually putting each other in danger. So the ideas are very closely linked. I was first exposed to stage combat in the Society of American Fight Directors when I was an undergrad at Michigan State University. So that was my first taste of it. And I went, ooh, I really like this. I want more. And so I continued to pursue those certificates over time. And, currently, tomorrow, I'm teaching, a stage combat class in sword fighting. And, it's going to be the first time the actors pick up a sword and swing it around and figure out how it works.
Boy.
It sounds like a scary premise, but
because there are students in that class who are going to think they're Errol Flynn.
Absolutely. And they're going to think that they can go really fast and do all these things. But once I show them, hey, here's where the danger could be. Here's where I'm going to flag for you that you've got a tendency to do this thing. So let's see how we can counterbalance that in the choreography. Being able to teach principles of safety in a variety of ways empowers the actors to be able to advocate for themselves better. I give a big speech here every year about why it is totally unsafe to receive a contact slap to the face and all of the things that could go wrong if you receive a contact slap to the face. And it freaks them out, as it should.
Yeah.
So then when I teach them, here's all the ways that we can make it look like a contact slap to the face without actually using one, then they feel so much more confident. Okay, I know I have this tool now that if I go into a rehearsal space where there might not be a fight choreographer on the staff, there may not be someone who's hired for this particular role, and I'm being asked to slap this other person, I know how to keep myself safe and I know how to keep my scene partner safe. So it's one of the essential skills that I make sure all of the actors know. I teach them how to slap each other without hurting each other and how to fall. Those are the two things I'm like, every actor needs to know how to do these two things before they graduate, because those are safety tools that they can maintain their body and their instrument long term if they know how to do those things correctly.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, that's good stuff. I'm still going to stay on your good side no matter what.
A wise choice. Otherwise, I'll run your whole through with a sword.
Busselle, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming in and talking with us and telling us all about things that, I think everybody in the business really needs to have more of a look at and to explore, because Acting is not just fun and games. It's not just throwing lines at each other. There is some danger involved, and we have to learn how to
Absolutely.
negotiate that. So thank you so much. I hope the snow's not too bad, and good luck.
Thank you.
Hey kids, thanks for listening to On Stage, Off Stage. On Stage, Off Stage is produced monthly, and all of our shows can be found at onstageoffstage.org and also on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoy what we do, please recommend us to your friends. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at OnOffStage. And if you are a theater artist with an upcoming project or interest, or know of someone in the theater world who'd make good chat, by all means, send us a note at onstageoffstagepodcast@gmail.com. Our theme music is Don't Worry, Be Frappy by the composer Max Dickinson. You can find a lot more of Max's magnificent music on SoundCloud. I'm George Sapio. Thanks once again for listening, and please be kind to those with whom we share this rock. And as always, happy theatering to all of you.